And if you are joining us via the Zoom, we would ask everybody to please keep your lines muted unless you're called upon to speak. And it does look like one of the lines right now, somebody on the Zoom is not muted. Okay, it is. Everybody is muted now. All right, perfect. City of Glendale Common Council is now in session. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Flags are over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Vukovic,
Here.
Alderman Doherty,
Here.
Alderman Gelhardt,
Here.
Alderman Bailey,
Here.
yeah,
Unmuted for a second. Philip, if you could please unmute and state your attendance, please.
Here. You guys can hear me? Hold on.
Okay, Philip, I don't know if you've got a microphone issue, but we actually can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Somebody joining. Yeah, so Philip, your mic is not working right now. You may need to disconnect and rejoin the meeting. All right, would you complete the roll then, please?
Alderman Schmelzling,
Is excused, yeah.
Alderwoman Shaw. Here.
We do have right now 4 present, so we do have a quorum here, and we'll wait for Philip to, rejoin there. All right, Philip,
Can
I
you
see
guys-
that you've rejoined. Can you speak and say that you're
Can you
here
guys hear
so we
me?
can hear you?
I'm here. Oh, God. Sorry, guys. Here? Can you guys
Okay,
hear
he
me?
just gave a thumbs up. So, okay, perfect. We heard you. So, all right. All right. So now we've gone through the attendance. Next is public comment. Glendale residents, business owners, and property owners are invited to speak to the council on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but are within the city's ability to regulate or control. Is there anyone wishing to speak to a non-agenda item? Yes, ma'am. You could step up to the microphone and state your name and address. And when you speak into the microphone, make sure you pull it down and are talking directly into it. They're really sensitive mics. If you're off even a little bit, it doesn't pick you up. You got to be talking right into it. So. You need to sit
All right.
down and then talk into it, please. And make sure it's aimed right at you. There we go.
Okay, my name is Corinne Pillsbury. I'm at 4965 North Iroquois in the Estabrook Triangle. I am here because my family moved to Glendale in 2019. And we moved here because of its close-knit neighborhoods, affordable, and don't mind paying extra for exceptional services and with taxes. Since moving, we've witnessed some alarming trends that we feel need to be addressed. I did a little research to back it up, and the property crime rate has been going up every year. Our neighborhood sees it, I feel, a lot more because we are on the boundary. And my kid's bike was stolen last night. So I then became one of those people, one of 25 in Glendale, that have a chance of becoming a victim of property crime. I'd like to know what the city is planning on addressing for those issues, and would love to hear the suggestions and some resolution.
So I appreciate you bringing the item up. We can respond to at least a little bit of things tonight, but we could put that as an agenda item on a future meeting.
That would be great.
I can tell you that we do have police, I'll let the chief speak to the police. We do have police patrols all throughout the city. But one of the things you are seeing, and I actually been interviewed in a couple of news stories about this, is there is a lot of spillover crime out of Milwaukee, and it is affecting all of the suburbs as far south as Franklin, as far, north into the North Shore, out into Tosa. So we are a community of roughly 13,500 people, and we have a police force that's almost the size of Wauwatosa's, which is 3 times our size. So we already have a pretty ample police force because we have such a large business community. But even at that, the problems we're experiencing from the neighbor city are times almost overwhelming for some of the forces in the suburbs to handle. But I'll let the chief speak to the increased patrols that he has and what's happening. So Chief, do you want to address that a little more?
No, I would just like to, excuse me, mirror the mayor's comments. Is we're aware of it. We're trying very hard. We only have so many resources. We do have to prioritize. It's troubling for us. We're doing the best we can, but there's a lot of crime going on, and we do have to prioritize them. So I'm sorry that your bike was stolen, but we're getting a lot of thefts from vehicles and car thefts, and those are the things that we're try to put our resources to stop those at first.
I've heard and witnessed other close persons.
I need you to speak into the mic because the people on the Zoom can't hear you. Yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
And I would even go out there. I'd be willing for that neighborhood, if you can close off an alley, make an alley one way, anything you could do to try and prevent as well. I think myself and my neighbors would appreciate.
We also participate in neighborhood watch programs. Some neighborhoods do have active programs. I don't
Mhm.
know if yours does. If it doesn't, though, you could certainly work with the chief. We have an officer who helps coordinate those.
Actually, the neighbor right behind me,
Okay.
and she's still having trouble with it. So
Sure.
If you would like to give me a call at some time, and then we can talk about this further.
Okay.
Because community and neighborhood block watches are really the first step in making sure everybody watches out for each other. And if we have people calling us when they see something suspicious, we have a much better chance of stopping it, or at least catching people doing it. So.
very
thank you.
much.
Yep, thank you. Any other non-agenda items people want to address?
Hi, Robert Cronwell, 7530 North Applewood Lane. I was looking for a status update on TIF District number 9. It was all set for final approval by the Joint Review Board, and then nothing happened, and I haven't heard anything about it since. What's the status on that?
It's been temporarily withdrawn. We've met with the developer since then. They haven't come back yet with a new proposal.
So they didn't execute the developer agreement? Or
They did not.
when it's withdrawn, does it start over from scratch, or does it start again?
There's a
pretty much
window
right
of
where-
time in which they can come back with an alternative proposal, but at the moment, I don't know where we are in that window of time.
Did they give an explanation for what happened?
They didn't, but they don't have to give us an explanation. They can just say they're withdrawing and that's what they did. So,
Okay.
yep.
And we don't get to recoup the 15,000 we spent on the consulting firm and legal fees and everything?
That I don't know.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, they pay for those.
Oh, okay, they do. Okay, thank you. All right, any other non-agenda items? Yes, ma'am. Just start talking into it.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Karen Cant. I live at 5764 North Sydney Place, and I'm not sure if this is on the agenda tonight or not. I know the We Energies reps were going to be here to address some power outages, but I was wondering if they were also going to be addressing some of the clear cutting and spraying that had been done along the Oak Leaf Trail and right away.
I believe that is part of their discussion because that was
Okay.
part of their mitigation efforts. So,
Okay,
yeah, and I'll make sure to ask questions about
all
it.
right, thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone on the Zoom that wishes to speak to a non-agenda item? If so, you may unmute and state your name and address, please. All right, no one on the Zoom, anyone in the office, in the audience? All right, we'll move on then with the agenda. The next item on the agenda is adopting the consent agenda. There are 4 items: the minutes of our last meeting, approval of monthly reports, denial of a claim, and approval of the 2022 used vehicle dealers and secondhand pawnbrokers license applications. They're all renewals from previous years. So can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Doherty. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gelhard. Any discussion? Okay, without objection, then the consent agenda is adopted, and hearing no objections, we will move on. All right, items of new business. First item on new business is review and authorization to execute a multi-year joint library services agreement with the villages of Bayside, Fox Point, and River Hills. This first came before us last fall with a deadline of December 31st. The other three communities did sign by December 31st. Glendale said we wanted 6 more months to see where fundraising would go. And so we are now back at the 6 more months. So we are here tonight to hear a presentation from President Eno Walde, the president of the Village of Bayside, where the proposed library is to be built, who's also been heading up the fundraising efforts along with the village president from Fox Point. And so I will turn it over to President Walde.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy, and thanks for having me back. So a lot has occurred over the last 6 months, and I'm sure you're eager to hear that. So first and foremost, I want to start with some thank yous. So I want to thank Andy Peterson at the Village of Bayside. He and I have worked tirelessly on this fundraising over the last 6 months. There's obviously a lot of other people involved, but I did not know when I got elected president of the Village of Bayside that I was also stepping in to be the head of fundraising for the North Shore Library. So with Andy Peterson's help, it's been an incredible last 6 months. I also want to thank Baker Street Consulting, who have been our consulting advisors on the fundraising. Rhonda Gould, who I know is on the Zoom, is the new director of the North Shore Library. If you have not had a chance to meet her, she has been an incredible ally. I think the library's made an incredible hire with Rhonda, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing to work with her. I also want to thank Kirk Glasner as the president of the library board, President Frazier, Mayor Kennedy, and President Anderson in River Hills, who have all been fantastic allies in this effort. So when I was here last at the end of December, the project that was set in front of me was to raise $8 million, and I was given 6 months to do that. That is no small task, but we have a lot of good news to report about what's happened. So first, that $8 million was split into 2 $4 million segments. The first $4 million segment was the land and the shell of the property that the library would fit into. And the second $4 million tranche was the actual build out of that box into a library building. So in late March of 2022, I was able to secure the donation of the box, the land in the box for the library from the developers, Bill Lamacchia and Scott Yauk. They were extremely generous with that gift. That is obviously a very significant gift. That is half of what we were set out to fundraise for. The exact details of how that gift is going to be made are yet to be worked out. And in part, that's because we need Glendale to sign on to this agreement. Obviously, the structure of the library is different with the remaining 3 communities alone or with Glendale. And this is going to be a recurring theme. And so I strongly want to urge you to sign on to this library agreement tonight. However, there have been press releases from Bill Lamacchia and Scott Yauk and their companies. They have talked to me extensively about their donation of this building and property. Actually, last Friday, I got a sneak peek of not only the library build out, which is available online and in pamphlets. If you don't have those additional updated schematics of what the library is going to look like, I'm happy to forward them to you. That building looks absolutely incredible. The apartment complex that's going to be submitted on top of the library is also just an unbelievable building. The proposal includes not only modern amenities, but a lot of detail to fit into the mid-century modern architecture of the village as you go into the Village of Bayside. So a lot of effort and thought is going into that project. So I'm extremely excited to be working with the developers on this library project. The other giant news that I have for you is that in early May, after a lot of work with Andy and myself, with letters from the various presidents and Mayor Kennedy who were involved in this, we were able to get onto an appropriations recommendation from U.S. Representative Gwen Moore for $5 million to go towards the build out of this library. So in the U.S. House of Representatives, the various representatives get various appropriations. This is a sort of an incumbent gift that they get. And traditionally, Representative Moore has allocated between $1 million and $2 million for various projects within her district. After extensive conversations with her office between Andy Peterson and myself, supplemented with letters from the various heads of the communities that are involved, it was an incredible accomplishment to get her to recommend this project for $5 million of federal funding. Obviously, that funding still needs to go through the Appropriations Committee. I anticipate that that's going to be happening before the fall elections, kind of an incumbent benefit. And so that money should be coming probably voted on later this year, with funding happening either late in the year or early in 2023. But we do know that one of the requirements will be that all of the money needs to be spent in 2023. Which should be no problem for us, given that that is the exact timeline of the build out of the library. So with that benefit alone, we've accomplished the $4 million additional build out that we've got. Technically, we're now at about 9 if we're using the allocation of dollars that we used previously. But obviously, that's not where the fundraising has ended. In fact, it's not even where the fundraising had begun. So as I'm sure you know too, shortly after I was here in December, we were able to recruit Bud Selig and Marianne Lubar as the heads of the fundraising effort. They were the faces of the committee. They also, are able to do quite a lot themselves, but are well connected within the communities. For Commissioner Selig, one of the things that we had proposed to him that he was absolutely tickled about was the idea of a Bud Selig room for leadership within the library structure itself. So as you may or may not know, there have only been 10 commissioners for Major League Baseball in the history of baseball. We're fortunate to have one of them living in our community. And so when we approached him about having a place where he could have some important papers and memorabilia and things where he could park some of that stuff, and also have a room where we could have annual meetings about leadership. Leadership is something that's become very important to him. He teaches at 3 universities about the topic of leadership. He was extremely excited about being involved in the project. He's excited about the library being in the North Shore. In his words, he called himself a library freak, and that is exactly the kind of person who we wanted involved in this project. Marianne Lubar's interest in the project stemmed from her involvement with children. She's most particularly interested in the children's section, has been involved in the design of the children's section, really involved in the design of the library project as a whole. We're still working out what gifts these two are going to bring to the table. But more importantly, we've been actively engaging with them and their networks in terms of who they can connect us with and who those people could not only connect us with, but also give gifts to. We know for certain that, for example, Mr. Selig, Commissioner Selig, makes his charitable gifts at the end of the year. And so we're anticipating something coming from him later in the year. We met with him as late as last Tuesday in person, and I'm extremely excited about the involvement that he's going to have. Without calling out individual families or foundations, we've also talked to numerous individual donors, family foundations, businesses about gifts that they are making and planning to make. Again, a lot of them do their charitable gifts at the end of the year. And when we say, hey, what can you do? They say, we'll get back to you, but we're definitely interested in being involved. The one that is probably of most significant interest here in Glendale that I will do them a favor and call them out is Johnson Controls. President Frazier from Fox Point and I had a very productive and fruitful meeting with some executives at Johnson Controls. Given that they are a Glendale resident business, they see this as a personal project for them that they're interested in getting involved with. They have an educational interest in the library. For those of you who know the involvement that they had with getting the new Bucks Arena done, their involvement there too was from an educational perspective. There are systems that are built at that facility with, say, plexiglass walls so that you can actually see how things like HVAC work and how various systems that Johnson Controls produces work within a structure like that. And so we talked about them doing donations in kind or outright donations of those projects so that they can help further their educational interests. Of course, when you work with Johnson Controls, the company, there's also the Johnson Controls Foundation, which we're also very excited in partnering with. That takes a little bit of time to work out. There was no way that that was going to get worked out within 6 months, but that's another avenue that makes me extremely excited about not only accomplishing our fundraising goals, but vastly exceeding them. Lastly, the last count I saw was that we had various levels of commitment from the public for roughly $1 million. I think it's technically just south of that. The largest of those gifts is waiting for actual shovels to hit the pavement, which hopefully is going to come within the third quarter this year. But that's another $1 million trough before we've even officially launched the public area of our fundraising. I know there has been some feedback from the public about not being engaged directly yet, but that's been purposeful. Obviously, when you've got to raise roughly $8 million, it's hard to do that in tranches of $100 and $500 and even $1,000. And so in consultation with Baker Street, one of the things we focused on is large gifts right now. But there have been conversations about how we're going to engage the public, how we're going to do challenge grants. The public's involvement hasn't even officially begun yet, and we've got roughly $1 million from them. So I'm here to report that we are doing extremely well with the fundraising. In fact, my goal from where I was sitting here in December has changed. I think we're going to vastly exceed the amount of money that needs to be raised in order to build out this library. I think that our focus is going to quickly turn to not only building out the library and building it out incredibly nicely. I'm happy to talk about the various things that are going to be incorporated to the library, but it's going to be a 5-star building. But I also believe that given the success that we are already experiencing and soon to experience with the fundraising, we're going to be able to actually endow the library with some money. So as you know, every time the library needs to do something or wants something or has a new program or wants to buy something, they've got to put on a dog and pony show with hat in hand and come to the 4 municipalities and ask for some money. I am hoping that we can turn the corner on those days so that the library can have some endowed money so that they can start to do that without having to come to us all the time. That's going to be beneficial to them, but it's also going to be beneficial to us as municipalities because we don't have to incorporate them into our budgets every time they decide to do something or they want to buy something or they want to introduce a new program. They're going to start to have some independence in doing that. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would strongly encourage you to consider passing this joint agreement with the other 3 municipalities tonight. I will tell you that the one common theme that I've heard over the last 6 months is what is going on with Glendale. The other 3 municipalities have signed off. We don't want to sign on to something if it's not going to go through, or if Glendale's going to change the way the game is played, or if we know that they're not going to be involved. And that has been, quite honestly, a fundraising challenge. And so I know that we can overcome that challenge. I'm very confident that with this news, this is game changing. And I think that with your signing on to this agreement, you're going to open the floodgates to some of the people who have been sitting on the sidelines or waiting to hear news from you. And so with that, I thank you for the opportunity to come back here 6 months later. I'm extremely happy to report to you, and I hope you take this news as positively as I have.
Thank you, President Walney. So I'm going to start actually with 2 questions. The first one is, and I actually know the answer to this because I've been a part of some of these conversations, but a number of these large gifts that we are talking about, are they contingent upon this being a 4-community library? Are some of the donors essentially saying, we'll contribute if we know that the budget every year is going to be borne by the 4 communities, but we're less likely to contribute if it's going to be borne by the 3 smaller villages?
Without a doubt, I can tell you that there have been a number of conversations that I've been involved with people saying we need to know what's going on with Glendale. I mean, the fact of the matter is Glendale is 50% of the operating budget. You're 50% of the current users. I mean, you're the largest community involved in this library. The library, in theory, can proceed with only 3 of the 4 municipalities without Glendale, but it's a totally different operation. The availability of resources is going to be dramatically different. And so donors want to know what they're signing on to. And I think having Glendale not have officially signed on to this agreement yet has been an impediment to the fundraising that I think once you do sign on is really going to, again, open the floodgates to those donors.
Thank you. And then my second question, the agreement does state that the 4 municipalities are responsible for the capital costs of filling out the library. So in the event that these fundraising efforts don't raise enough money and there is a shortfall, have you or any of the other two villages, I know in Glendale, we have not allocated any money toward capital expenditure for a library in our 5-year capital improvement plan. Have any of the other 3 communities indicated that they're putting money in their budgets just in case? Or, I mean, have you in Bayside, are you planning that, if the fundraising doesn't work, you're going to be ponying up Bayside share of that capital costs?
I'd be remiss to speak for River Hills and Fox Point, but I can tell you in Bayside, we absolutely have not even had those conversations. I mean, given the success that we've had with fundraising, again, not only is it fully my expectation that we're going to have these capital funds raised, we're going to exceed what our need is to the point where we can actually endow the library. I stood before you in December and told you failure is not an option. And I am 6 months later reiterating failure is not an option. And I am a little more sure now than I was back then because I've seen the successes that we've had. And so I'm raising the bar, not lowering it.
Thank you. All right, I'll now open it up to questions from members of the council. No questions? All right, well then I would entertain a motion that Glendale, that this common council, now pursuant to the resolution that we passed 6 months ago, that this common council direct me as the mayor to sign the multi-year joint library services agreement with the villages of Bayside, Fox Point, and River Hills. Can I have a motion to that effect, please? Moved by Alderwoman Shaw. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Vukovic. All right, any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. I understand what he just said very clearly, so I'm not an idiot. I understand exactly what you said, but I still don't have in writing that we will never have to pay anything. I understand that you may even be over the amount, and I get that, but that's the only,
Well, from what
so
he's-
I'm
yeah,
trying to understand, how do we work that part out?
right.
And then the second part, which I don't know if it's needed, do we have a budget? Because I think in the agreement, there was supposed to be a budget, or no?
There is a budget for the operating costs of the library, in which Glendale pays roughly 50% of those operating costs. For the current library, we pay 50% of the
Right.
operating costs. For the new library, we would continue to. It's essentially the same formula.
Right?
And so that formula is determined. If there were capital costs, it would be borne under the exact same formula. But what we're hearing is none of the communities have budgeted for capital costs. And so I know you want it in writing, but if none of us have it in our budgets, and if the library were to come back to us later and say we want capital costs, the city of Glendale can say, we're not ponying up any money. Because there is no, I mean, and it sounds like Bayside's not prepared to do that either.
But I guess this is, okay, one more question. So if that's the case, and I'm listening to you very carefully, but if we sign this agreement and you just said, normally we would have to pay 50% of capital costs. I think that's what you just said, right? But we are saying right now that we're not putting it in our budget. But does that still stop us from having to pay the 50% of?
It does. The reason why the other library, the current library, has never been renovated is because every year one of the communities doesn't have it in their budget to do. And so it gets put off to the next year. And then the next year, 3 of the communities have the money and one of them doesn't. Every year it's been a different community. It's the reason we've never renovated the current library space.
But
Because
that
if all
doesn't-
4 don't agree to put the money in their budgets, it doesn't happen.
Okay, but that still doesn't mean that we don't have to pay. It just may be years and years down the line. I'm just trying to understand this very clearly. So when I make my vote, it will be on what so even though we say we don't have it in our budget, it will just be moved to another year and eventually we will have to pay that though.
But the fundraising is also going forward, right? If the fundraising ends up, meets the targets, then we don't have to pay anything.
I just want
Right.
the whole picture.
Right.
Just so I
Anything
understand,
into what I asked, I just wanted the whole picture.
Just understand a piece of what Alderman Vukovic is asking. With regards to capital costs, I know we're talking immediate capital costs, but are you talking future capital costs?
I'm talking about, I know we're gonna have future capital costs. That's something completely different. I'm talking about to
No.
build this library capital cost. That's
None of
what
us
I
have it
mean.
in our budgets to do it. So it would have to be approved by all 4 communities. The agree, it would have to be an amount, it'd have to be a full budget, and it would have to be agreed upon. We'd all have to put it in our capital improvement project budgets. Yeah. All right, Alderman Doherty.
I can appreciate all you've got done in 6 months. You've certainly been busy. But for me, the challenge is, I guess we didn't give enough time yet, because I don't think anything's changed, in my opinion, from where we are exactly. There's been a lot of work done, but as far as the things we wanted to see before we move forward in 6 months, I'm not seeing them yet.
And that's a chicken and egg problem,
That's
because
right.
I've been a part of a number of these conversations, right? I mean, I've been on the fundraising calls. I've been a part of some of these conversations, and I know that there are people who are willing to sign commitments if it's a 4-community library. They're not, that they're less likely to want to sign those commitments if it's a 3-community library with half the budget and only open certain number of hours, because it isn't the same quality of library. So there's a chicken or egg thing. And somewhere along the line, we got to put either the chicken or the egg out there and start.
There's
it.
been a
So-
chicken and egg problem all along.
Right, right.
We've been the chicken doing stuff. So for me, I think they just need more time. I'd give more time.
Well, the problem is the longer we say we want to delay this, the less likely it is that these donors are going to, the donors that right now are committed, they're committed to a 4-library project that is the new North Shore Library, not a 3-community, and maybe there'll be a 4th. Yeah, they want to know it's going to be open full hours. They want to know that it's going to have the full children's programming. They want to know that it's going to have senior programming. They want to know, they want to know what they're getting into. And, what a library that's open 20, 25 hours a week looks like, as opposed to a library that's open 40 to 45 hours a week is different. Yeah. Yep, Alderwoman. Oh, sorry, Alderman, go ahead.
I just want to read from the resolution language. It says, prior to the execution of the agreement, which we're being asked to sign tonight, and as a condition precedent to the Common Council's approval, sufficient written assurance shall be provided of all the following. And the 2 major points that have to be agreed upon is Cobalt Partners has signed a binding agreement to build the North Shore Library within 2 years of the signing of the effective date of the agreement. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen a document that Cobalt Partners has signed that they're going to build the North Shore Library. And then the other has to do with the timeline and preliminary budget to complete construction of the library. Again, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. And I'm supposed to get that in writing before I approve this, and I don't have it. And I don't think any of us have written assurance that the condition precedents have been met here.
Other commentary? Alderman Vukovic, go ahead. You need to speak into the
I
microphone.
know I'm. The earmarked money that is supposed to come from the federal government has not been approved yet, correct?
That's correct. I think so my understanding of that process is that the biggest hurdle is getting on the representatives list, because it's a very finite list. I think it's limited to 5 projects, if I'm not mistaken. And so we work tirelessly to get on that list. But once Representative Moore puts us on the list, then there's a process. It's got to go to the House Appropriations Committee and get voted on, and that's how funding actually comes out. So I can't make that go any faster. I anticipate that happening in the fall, but we're on the list.
Same list.
Speak into the microphone.
Is this the same list Glendale was on for our project, but then they had to?
So
Is that the
yes,
same
yes and
process?
no.
Okay.
Ours was a transportation related project, and all transportation related earmarks were stripped last year
Okay.
because of the ARPA funding.
Okay.
They basically said, we're giving you all these, trillions of dollars here, you're supposed to spend that on your transportation related expenditures. And
Okay,
so-
I just
Yep.
wanted to see.
But other things like libraries and schools and things like that that were earmarks last year did go through the budget priority process and were given. Yeah. Alderman Gelhard?
We're buying a pig in a poke here. I mean, we have no assurances whatsoever that they're not going to come back and say, "No, we need $4 million from Glendale to complete the build out because of cost overruns and inflation and material supplies and et cetera." If we're going to spend any money towards constructing a library, it should be in Glendale. I mean, we're already paying half of the operating expenses on an annual basis. Now we're being asked to also fund the construction of the building. It's like, well, that's a bridge too far. None of the communities that are part of the North Shore Library Agreement right now, or the past library agreement, had to pay anything towards the construction of the existing North Shore Library. And I think that should be the way it is for this. They shouldn't have to pony up any money. And the idea that we would be off the hook because we don't budget for it, I don't think that's going to fly. I think they're going to say, no, you signed this agreement, now pay us the money to build this library.
Also, the one from years past, that's circumstance were different then. That's trying to say, well, why do it now? Because we did it in the past. Well, things do change over the years.
So I'm going to offer my viewpoint on this now. I've looked at the option of not joining with the other three communities on a North Shore Library is that Glendale has to go in on its own and build its own library. And with inflation, with the cost of materials, the position we are in at the moment, the cost of building out our new library, Rachel gave us numbers last year of somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $8 million. That's that was the cost she gave us. One of the things she listed in there was $1 million to furnish and build a collection. I don't know if you looked at the cost of books and computers. The cost to furnish a library and to build a collection is probably between $4 and $6 million on its own. Then you have the purchase of a building and a renovation of a building. The cost of our own library now is probably close to $15 million. When Whitefish Bay built its library 20 years ago, it was about 8 or 9 million then. So, I mean, imagine the cost, of 20 years of inflation and the fact that we're going through a period right now of hyperinflation, supply chain issues. So I have a significant concern about Glendale. We might, if this fails, have to pay $2 million, or if we go it alone, we suddenly have to come up with 15 million, and we're going to spend $1 million a year to run a library. So, because we're going to be putting 100% of the costs. So, and the only way we can do the other item, the Glendale only library, is to go out to referendum, ask the voters in Glendale to agree to raise their taxes for 20 years for capital costs to be able to build a library, because we don't have the same level of fundraising that we have when we join with the other communities. We don't have a Lake Drive with $5 and $10 million homes. We don't have a River Hills in Glendale with their 5-acre lots and their $1 million homes. So we don't have the same clientele to be able to pull from for fundraising purposes that we have when we're with the other three villages. And so we have to ask voters to approve a $20 million increase or 20-year increase of about $15 million in their taxes. And then they also have to approve an operational cost of us footing the bill, because we don't have the money in our budget every year for that extra $500,000 that's right now being borne by the other three communities. So when I look at the financial costs of this, I see we are far better when we partner with the other communities and when we build a North Shore Library where there is a significant fundraising base, where there is an excitement and an interest in this new project, as opposed to saying we're going to go it alone and then we all cross our fingers and throw salt over our shoulders or whatever it is we do to get the good luck, pray to the gods, whatever. I mean, whatever, to get people to vote yes on 2 referenda in order to be able to have a library. So I look at the 2 options and I'm like, to me, financially, yeah, I'm sad to see the library move 1 exit up the freeway 5 minutes further than it is right now. but it's never been the closest library to my house anyway. I've taken my kids to Whitefish Bay more often than I've taken my kids to the North Shore Library because it's closer to my house. People go to whatever's closer to them, and people will continue to use all the libraries in the system. So that's my first concern, is the financial cost. But my second concern is some of the arguments that I have seen put forward by, a former alderman who puts stuff on Nextdoor, what I've heard from comments from residents in the community about why should Glendale pay to build something in another community? Well, one, we're not being asked to pay anything right now. There's a fundraising effort going on. But if we should have to, keep in mind that we pay for 4 fire stations that are not in Glendale. We're paying the capital costs of the Whitefish Bay, the Shorewood, the Fox Point Bayside, and the Brown Deer Fire Departments. We're paying for a health department whose 2 locations are in Brown Deer and Shorewood. They're not in Glendale. And we're paying for a 911 dispatch that's currently housed in Bayside. All the communities, we have worked together as a North Shore, and things get spread out around the North Shore wherever the locations are. Our residents will have 5 libraries right near Glendale that they can go to. The North Shore Library, which would be in Bayside, the Brown Deer Library, the Villard Library, the Whitefish Bay Library, and then, believe it or not, Shorewood. Glendale goes all the way down to Capitol Drive. The Shorewood Library is a little over a mile outside of Glendale's boundaries. We have 5 libraries right here. And so I just look at the financial costs and say, we are far smarter to stay with the other communities, to stay with the North Shore Library, than we are to hope on a wing and a prayer we can get our residents to approve $15 million and an ongoing increase of $500,000 for to go on our own. So that's where I am with this. I really hope that your vote tonight is one that directs me to sign this agreement, and let's move forward with the other 3 communities.
I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Alderman.
So we own the current space that the library is in. The 3 communities move to Bayside. We just take over the space that we own. It doesn't cost us anything. We might have to, populate it with books. I understand that. And we might want to renovate it, but it's not going to cost all that much money to take over the old space if it comes to that. So if it's just about money, it seems to me that would be the most economical way of going. In terms of a referendum, if it came to that, we live in a community that just approved a $77 million referendum for Nicolay. I don't think we'd have any problem getting a referendum passed by our population for $10 million if it came to that. I don't know that it does. There have been a lot of comments about, my kids don't go to, we go to the Whitefish Bay Library because it's closer. Ultimately, we're going to be in a situation where there are no Glendale residents going to Bayside to the library. They're going to go to Whitefish Bay or they're going to Brown Deer, but we're going to be paying for the library in Bayside that nobody goes to. It seems to me that for purposes of, serving the community, a library in Glendale is what we should be looking for. It's a community resource, all the studies have showed that children do much better with the local library. And I think that's what we should be looking for.
Alderman Vukovic. Well, actually, can I respond to Alderman Gelhard real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Alderman Vukovic. So the existing space is currently under a lease agreement with the North Shore Library for 14 more years. And we have voted to leave that North Shore Library a year and a half ago. So I'm just going to say, if you think they're going to release that lease, and when the library moves, if we don't join the new library, they may just hold that lease for spite, for the next 14 years. And then we can't use that library space because it is at least a library for at least 14 more years to the North Shore Library. They could just use it to store stuff if they wanted to.
It's got to be used as a library.
No, it has to be used for a community purpose. And if a lease is owned by the North Shore Library, they could say it's spillover space for the North Shore Library. They could use it for programming. So they don't have to give it up. And the children's room that Marianne Lubar has been working to put together is going to draw in families from all over the North Shore. It's going to be the nicest children's room of any Milwaukee County library. I mean, it's incredibly impressive. So, to respond to your 2 things, I mean, those are my 2 responses. I'll turn it over to Alderman Vukovic.
Here's my big speech. I went back and forth on this because obviously Glendale needs a library. I am with Mayor Kennedy, when it comes to, most of my district doesn't go to that library because it's, the North Shore Library there, because it's far from my district. Everything in most of my district is south of Silver Spring. Then I went back, but I am so sick of us as a community having to take the brunt of other costs from the other communities and expecting it just because our population is a little bit bigger. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at my constituency can even, and as Alderman Gelhardt just said, a $77 million referendum from Nicolay. Yes, I didn't vote for it. Can't help that, but that is for our children, and I think that is why it passed. Having a referendum for a library where we have 4 other ones, I'm having a hard time thinking it's going to pass, and especially with my district, they don't have that kind of money. With 8% inflation, my district is mostly working families, just going to the jobs, coming back. They bought their homes 20, 30 years ago, and they have, value in their homes. But like I was talking to somebody else, if they sell it, they're just going to have to buy just an expensive home as well. So they're not gaining anything from it. But they really can't afford another hit on something that could happen, because they may actually come up with this money. And then we have lost an opportunity to be a partner with the other communities. And we're in debt because we have a library that we need to fund. I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but those are 2 things that are real to me, especially when it comes to the constituency that I serve.
I also want to say, with respect to the constituency, obviously mine is along the same line, but there's also the elderly who are on fixed incomes. So that's even going to be a hard sell if you want to go off on your own for a referendum.
Right. I do have 2 members of the public that wanted to speak to the issue. First is Rob Cronwell, and then was Reed Ripple. These are folks that reached out to their alderman before the meeting. So Rob, you're first. And then is Reed present in the room or on the Zoom? I don't see anybody on the Zoom named Reed or Ripple or anything. No one in the room? Okay. So it's just Mr. Cronwell. Go ahead.
Robert Cronwell, 7530 North Applewood Lane. There's a lot of complex components to this issue, but what's before the council tonight is you're looking to sign off on this resolution. And in order to do so, you have to make sure each of these contingencies decide, have they been met or have they not been met? And if you look at the contingencies, 2A is that formal donation from the builders, to build and donate the library, and that doesn't exist. In fact, apparently it hasn't existed. I want to read you an email exchange I had with the village manager over in Bayside. I said, "Dear Mr. Peterson, I read a couple of news articles about the $4 million donation from the Bayside Development Partners to LLC for the new North Shore Library. I asked the North Shore Library for any documentation they had on the donation pledge. The library director said they did not have any documentation, but the Village of Bayside did have an email or something. Could you please email me a copy of any documentation and emails laying out the details of the donation/pledge? If there's a formal contract or pledge agreement, I would like a copy of that as well." All right, a few days later, he responded, "Rob, sorry for my delay in response. I was out of the office most of last week and just catching back up. As the initial phase of fundraising efforts conclude later this month, agreements will be executed with the parties. However, they have not been done at this time. Thanks, Andy." I called Andy this afternoon to follow up to see if anything's been completed, because we're almost at the end of the month. And he responded, "There's no further updates from my last email. Thanks." There is no agreement from the developer to turn this space over to the North Shore Library. That is one of the criteria you put in this resolution, and it has not been met. I don't see how you can vote yes if the criteria hasn't been met. I mean, if you want to have another meeting in 24, 48 hours and rejoin the North Shore Library, fine. But the issue before you today is, have the criteria in this resolution been met? And the answer is no. I would also point out that the other communities signed off on their similar contingent agreements back in December. They stated that the agreement did exist when it didn't. I don't know why we're looking to do business with 3 other communities who apparently are willing to lie in order to get us to join in. The document didn't exist. They said it did. They signed off on it in an official document. I find that highly offensive, and we're stuck with them for 23 years if you say yes to this tonight. That's what the agreement says. And the idea that the other 3 communities can afford to operate 2 library spaces when half their operating budget disappears when we're no longer a part of it is ludicrous. They will not hold on to that, the current North Shore Library space. Or if they do, then we'll still have a library in Glendale, and we can join up with Brown Deer, which will cost us $150,000 less a year to join up with them. We can still use the library in Glendale, and we can use all the other libraries. I think it's great that we have this money potentially lined up, but none of it's been solidified yet. There were promises made back in September that would be taken care of by December. There were promises made in December that it would be taken care of by now. It has not been taken care of. I sat in remotely on the last North Shore Library Board meeting. They have no idea how much money they've raised. The consulting group hasn't been giving them monthly updates like they requested. And in fact, the board president was like, they haven't returned my phone calls the last few weeks when I've been trying to get a hold of them to find out what's been going on. This whole thing has been very poorly executed. And maybe in another 3 or 6 months, they can get everything lined up and it'll go forward. But without that written agreement from the developer, as you've seen tonight, when I talked about the TIF number 9 for Glendale, what happens if the developer decides it's, with the inflation and rising interest rates, we're going to scale back the development or maybe hold off on the development, and it doesn't happen. There's no agreement in place. There's no timeline in place, and you can't even set up a budget because until you know the footprint that's being donated, you can't really plan it out and figure out how much it's going to cost. So I'd like you to just focus on what it says in the resolution, decide whether it's been met or whether it hasn't. It clearly has not. Vote no, and then figure out what you're going to do going forward. I understand it's complicated. I understand the community is going a lot of different directions on it. But if you vote yes to this resolution, you're essentially lying to the public because these conditions have not been met. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other comments from members of the commission or members of the council? Sorry. Commission was last meeting. Council tonight. All right, I'm going to call for a vote then, and I'm going to ask for a roll call vote because I want to make sure that Alderman Bailey is able to be recorded. I don't know if we are able to hear him, but he can at least give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If a thumbs up would be an aye, a thumbs down would be a no. Okay, yeah.
I don't know what the protocol is. 5 minutes.
You're asking for a 5-minute recess? Okay, 5 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute recess. I'll give you 5 minutes. That's a personal privilege. I'll do that as the chair. Give you a 5-minute recess before we call for a vote. I can ask the members of the council now to take their seats, please. All right. As soon as Alderwoman Shaw rejoined us, I'm going to reconvene the meeting. So as I said at the beginning, this is the chicken and egg issue. There are agreements ready to be executed and signed that would meet the requirements that have been expressed, but the funders will not sign agreements unless they know it's a for-community library, period. They don't want to spend $8 million on a library that's open 20 or 25 hours a week because that's all the 3 villages can afford. So I'm going to ask the city attorney, do we, with the email exchanges that I have with President Walney and the information that I have received as mayor on behalf of the fundraising, as well as the fact that there are agreements that have not yet been signed and executed, but are prepared to be if this is a for-community library, do we meet the qualifications of, or is that particular item satisfied, in your opinion as our attorney?
The way I would answer that is that the board, council, each individual member of the council could conclude on their own that those agreements and documents you referred to may be sufficient written assurance. It does not require an executed specific agreement, but again, the ultimate decision is, as to whether or not those are sufficient assurances, which are in writing and waiting to be executed, satisfy each individual council member to vote one way or the other. So I just want to be clear, I'm not making a policy decision, but I do think that one could reasonably conclude that those are sufficient written assurances and that it does not require that any of those agreements. Okay, all right. So yes, I mean, I think that there's ample evidence upon which a council member could conclude that the agreements that are in writing, waiting to be executed, subject to all of the communities agreeing and signing on to the resolution, could be seen as sufficient written assurance. And, again, a council member could on their own make a determination and find that it doesn't satisfy their own, level of sufficiency, but it doesn't require, the way I read the agreement though, the resolution, it does not specifically require that the agreements be executed as a condition precedent to entering into.
Point of order. Have I seen all those things? Have I seen all those things? Have they been made available to me?
That would be a question. You're not on the fundraising committee, so you have not been a part of those. But you could take what has been spoken by the head of fundraising, as well as, you could make the decision one way or the other based on the information that's been provided, is what the city attorney is essentially saying. So we were ready to call for a vote. We took a 5-minute recess. We're now going to call for the vote, and I'm going to ask for a roll call, please.
Alderwoman Vukovic.
Mike was not on, so.
Yes.
Alderman, no, sorry, that's right, you call the roll.
Alderman Doherty,
No.
Alderman Gelhard,
Yeah, I don't think the conditions that have been met, so my answer is no.
Alderman Bailey.
Yes.
Say yes. Alderwoman Shaw,
Yes.
That was 3-2.
3-2.
Okay, by a 3-2 vote, then the council has directed me now to execute the multi-year joint library services agreement with the villages of Bayside, Fox Point, and River Hills. All right. Thank you. Thank you, President Walney. Thank you to the folks from the library who are here as well. All right, the next item on our agenda now is review and possible action about filing a complaint with the Wisconsin Public Service Commission concerning We Energies. I've invited folks from We Energies to join us this evening to essentially explain what was causing the significant number of outages that have existed in the Fourth Aldermanic District and what they are doing to mitigate those outages happening in the future. Although this whole conversation started because there've been 2 outages in the last 2 weeks again. So even with all the mitigation efforts, that's what's led to this conversation. So who is here from We Energies and ready to speak to us? So. Yeah, you certainly can. Although when you speak, you're going to have to move the microphone. I hate these microphones and I wish we had it in our capital budget to replace them with ones that weren't so weird. You have to speak like right at it, right directly into it. If you go turn your head even, it stops picking you up. So, all right. So if you could each introduce yourselves, and then our first, we'd like to know first, what has happened that's caused these outages? What are you doing to correct it? Because what is before us tonight is whether or not, we would file a complaint on behalf of the city of Glendale and its residents with the Public Service Commission. And so I guess we'll have you introduce yourselves and then talk with us about the outages and what you're doing to fix it.
My name is Jennifer Zier, and I oversee local affairs for We Energies.
My name is Bridget Beeman, manager of customer service in the Milwaukee or this area as well.
And I'm Dave Magna. I'm Vice President of Wisconsin Field Operations. So I'll start out by saying that nothing is more important than the safety and reliability for our customers that we serve. And we work very hard to look at reliability on an annual basis. Now, last year, there were several outages, 2 large outages due to catastrophic weather events, one in August, one in December, that caused long outages. What that did was it made us look at, and we'd look at our top feeders that are not performing well, and we do a detailed patrol on those feeders. So we spent time this winter looking at those feeders and identifying areas for improvement. What we found out there is that we needed to do a little bit of tree trimming. We did that earlier this year on Green Bay Avenue specifically, plus some other areas. We also looked at the protection review. So we added fusing. We added some equipment that we call trip savers, which automatically reclose. They're fuses, but they're smaller in nature. And then we're in the process of designing and installing a new recloser, replacing an existing one that's older in nature. It's hydraulic versus the new vacuum reclosers. It'll give us the ability to operate the system from our control center out in Pewaukee. Recently, the 2 outages that were experienced, one was caused by a car pole accident, and one was caused by 2 Mylar balloons getting into our primary. Now, Mylar balloons, you would ask the question, how can a Mylar balloon cause an outage? Mylar balloons are conductive. And believe it or not, we have many of these occur in our system annually. And we try to get bulletins out to, people don't lose track of your Mylar balloons for birthday celebrations, graduations, other things that people celebrate with. That one occurred most recently, I believe, June 10th. We made the repairs there, and then we did another patrol of that area to make sure that there are no other issues that we missed the first patrol, to make sure that if there are things that we need to mitigate, that we'll take care of those items as well. Last week, I had the opportunity to actually drive this area as well myself, because I wanted to see firsthand what the area looked like. Having experience in the field, I also very, very knowledgeable from a standpoint of the system and what it contains. And the system actually looks pretty good. There are a number of areas that are already undergrounded. And there are the main line, which goes up Green Bay Avenue, as far as I could go with the construction that's going on up there. But for the most part, it looks in pretty good shape. There are areas that have been rebuilt in the past, both overhead and underground. So again, from a standpoint of what we would do today, the reliability program and the top feeder program, the patrols that we did, when we do those two feeders as this, we see a minimum 50% improvement in our reliability over the course of that following year. So we're confident that the work that we did actually will improve the reliability, and the outages that occurred most recently, Mylar balloons and a car pole accident, unfortunately, those items do occur from time to time.
The problem with having so many overhead lines, Mylar balloons, when they get loose, they go up. If we had buried lines, Mylar balloons would never be a factor. And one of the things that we have asked is, why are you not, as you're expanding in different areas, choosing to bury lines in those new areas? For example, you're doing a huge expansion right now, right next to Maslowski Park. We approved it at the Plan Commission a few months ago. You're doing a huge expansion of your facility there. You know, why, as you're doing this work, are we still relying on all these overhead lines? Ones that when they're buried, cars don't hit poles. You know, Mylar balloons don't get caught in them because they're all underground, and you know, trees don't fall on them in heavy storms. So I guess, like, why are we still dealing with the same infrastructure we've been using since 100 years ago now, as opposed to going with what most of the modern world is doing, which is burying those lines?
And those are very good questions.
Hey, you'll need to direct the mic right at you. Right now it's tilted up a little bit. When you start speaking, it'll pick you up again.
All right. So those are very good questions. We look at burying lines where it makes sense. And in fact, when we look at our taps, typically we're burying taps off the main line. It's quite expensive to bury overhead conductors into the ground, transfer those conductors to an underground system. We looked at just burying this feeder alone would cost over $12 million. And so from a standpoint of the economics and the reliability, that's a huge price tag to look at about a 900 customer feeder. Now, when we look at what we can do with overhead versus underground, overhead, when we do have a repair that's needed, typically we are able to diagnose that relatively quickly. Underground feeders take longer to diagnose, longer to fix. The restoration process around that is definitely longer and more expensive. And so from a standpoint of what gets us back to normal configuration sooner, our overhead system has been proven to be very reliable. Again, equipment can fail. Underground equipment fails just as easily as overhead equipment. And depending on the type of equipment and the number of pieces of equipment you have out there, one of the things that we look.
I'm picking up. If the little red light goes off, then they can't hear you on the.
Right.
Sorry.
The existing equipment that's out there, from a standpoint of the existing easements that we have, depending on how many easements we have to procure, all of that factors into what we look at when we're going to go into an area and underground. Now, having said that, we are embarking on a huge storm hardening plan for our entire system, and we have identified areas that we will underground. Now, that's a project that's going to go between 5 and 10 years. Not all of our projects have been identified, and we don't know, if this specific one would have pieces of it buried, or if there are other areas in Glendale that will be burying. But we look at the criteria involved based on the age of the system, the existing easements that we have, and a number of factors, a number of other factors that allow us to look at and what are the economics involved in burying lines.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is even when we bury feeders, there's always going to be pieces of our system that are above ground. You've got the higher voltage lines that won't get buried just because the cost is exponentially pretty high. The other issue is we also do have cars hit pad mounts and cause outages, and those outages take longer to fix, as Dave mentioned, because it's underground. And you also have to keep in mind when we bury feeders, we have to procure easements. Each individual homeowner also has to pay for that hookup. And that's going to be a few $1,000s, typically 2 to 3, I think. And they have to grant an easement. And we have done some of these where some people have said they won't do it. And then we have to bring it up above ground and then go underground again. So there are those issues. Now, we've had pretty good luck in some of the feeders we've done in recent years where most all of the people have done it. But you always have that wild card where we're not sure and we can't force people to take it.
What's the reliability when you have part underground, part above ground, and it sort of zigzags back and forth between overground and underground? I mean, do you end up with even less reliability then, unless it's either all underground or all above ground?
The issue there is that the secondary that feeds the homes, so the service drop from the pole to the home is still exists. So in many cases, you'd have individual outages versus a larger outage. If a tree fell and took down services in a backyard, those individual customers would be affected, not the whole feeder. But again,
they're a lower priority when there's an outage because you're trying to get back the 1,000 people that lost, and then you hit the individual homes. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have one other question that's been raised by a number of neighbors. Just along by Johnson Controls, there's the bike path area, basically where you're doing your construction and then heading a little bit toward the south and east along the bike trail, along the Oak Leaf Trail. There's been significant clear cutting. Like everything is gone for what, I don't know, probably like a 1/10 of a mile swath, right? It's a huge wide swath. I understand the needing to trim around trees and stuff, but what motivated that particular or instigated that particular clear cutting of that area? Because that's an area that's been, I mean, there's a wetlands through there. And now that wetlands is entirely exposed. And so I guess there were concerns from neighbors about that, as well as what looks to be some sort of a chemical application going on. People walk their dogs through there, people jog through there, the kids ride bikes through there. So can you tell us what were the circumstances for which you wanted to do that? Why are you doing such a large area, and what kind of chemicals are you using?
So that's a transmission corridor, and that's ATC, our transmission company that we contract with for our high voltage wires that feed our substations. They have a different set of standards from a standpoint of their requirements for NERC, and NERC is our North American Reliability Commission. That is very specific with regards to their cutting program, and they have easements that allow them to do that clear cut trim to protect the transmission system. And the transmission system feeds all of us from, and we're part of a larger group that feeds all the way down to Louisiana, that MISO, you may have heard of that organization, Midwest Internet Independent System Operator. And they basically take all of the generation, pool it together and transmit it over those transmission lines. So it's in our best interest and in ATC's best interest to make sure that those lines are clear and reliable. As far as the chemical that they're spraying, that we use what is called Garland 4. And what that does, it's a chemical that once they cut the trees and spray on the stumps, it prevents those stumps from sprouting growth and regrowing. And so it basically takes a chemical from the tree and interacts with it to prevent that from happening. Now,
Does it have a commercial name that we might know?
I only know it by what it's called Garland 4.
Okay.
Now, that's what we use. I'm not exactly sure. I tried to find out today from ATC what they're using out there, but it is a spray that's been EPA approved. It is something that the people that are applying it have to have a license to do so. And they have to have qualified operators that are spraying the trees and the underbrush that they're taking care of out there.
Because I think it came to a I've lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and, you know, those poles go, granted, the bike path's only been there about 7 or 8 years, 9 years, something like that. I've never seen that clear cutting along that bike path before. I mean, in 20 years, before that it was railroad tracks and there were some paths and things that went back through there that weren't paved. They weren't a part of the Oak Leaf Trail system. I've never seen that kind of clear cutting before. It's why it stood out, you know, so many people have been so shocked because it is such a drastic, you know, sort of raising of the landscape as opposed to any kind of trimming that's been done in the past.
I think like Dave alluded to, the federal government has standards because that transmission system is seen as obviously vital to the country. So they have a standard where they're really going through there and making sure it's clear so nothing goes on in those corridors. I think part of the frustration that people feel is when it sits for that long, like you just said, there is an easement and people kind of start using that easement as part of their yard and they might have planted things in there. And we totally understand that, but it is something they have to do.
It actually hasn't touched any of the property of the individuals because they're on one side of the berm where the railroad tracks were, but it has gone right along the Johnson Controls side. I have not heard from Johnson Controls, so they haven't you know called to complain or anything. But no, it's just that there is actually it's part of the. I mean, there is an easement with you all and with ATC for the Oak Leaf Trail to go through there. So there are paved paths that are a part of the county park system, and this is adjacent to all of those park trails, and so that's where residents are starting to ask what's going on while the city's not doing it and we don't have answers. So, you know, we have you here tonight and wanting to find out, you know, what do we tell our residents? And is there a concern, for example, you know, because there are some trails through the woods there that people walk their dogs and, you know, hiked, and those predated the paving of the Oak Leaf Trail. And so people still, I think, take some of those trails and things when they're out walking their dogs. And is it safe to do so? And, you know, what kind of things are you using? So Garland 4 is the, yeah, okay.
And I think the agreements that we have, for example, with Milwaukee County, we have agreements with other counties and communities for these trails along these former corridors or current corridors. As part of those lease agreements, there is also always something built in that the maintenance of the power lines, if they are still there, with some of the trails, they're gone. Those easements are still in force, and that there is a right to go through and do the trimming that's necessary to keep those power lines running.
And I did notice that where the Glendale Community Gardens, because we have an agreement with you all for the use of an easement space where we have the Glendale Community Gardens. There's also a requirement that we have to actually mow the area around the community gardens because We Energies won't be responsible for it. But you haven't done any clear cutting there. And so I haven't heard anything from the community gardens folks other than is what they're spraying going to impact what we're planting in our boxes. So, but it sounds like the Garland 4 is, you're talking about certified folks that are spraying it and applying it only where it's necessary. They're not getting anywhere near those gardens.
Shouldn't be. What they're doing is spraying what they've cut to prevent that from regrowing.
Okay. So probably the closest it is to any of those is maybe 100 feet. Right by the gardens, because it's on the other side of the trail. So, okay. All right. Does any members of the council go to Alderman Gelhard?
You know, I just buried some cable in my yard and having to deal with the roots of mature trees. It's unbelievable. So I can appreciate how difficult it is to bury a line, especially in a neighborhood that's been around since 1940. But I just experienced an outage in my district, District 3, last week. And I just wondered, is there someone that, for instance, I could call at We Energies? Because when the outage occurs, I get the calls and they want to know what's going on. And is there a contact person that I could contact? And, then I could say, I just talked to so-and-so and this is the situation.
So I would be your person, Bridget Beeman. you can actually contact me directly, and we can look into it and do an investigation and get you restored as quickly as possible.
I'll leave you with a card. Can you please send me your contact information? I'll share it with all the members of the council, or do you have your contact information? Because obviously we don't want you to say in a meeting that's being recorded, we don't want you to go to the.
Well, and that's one thing I would like to point out too, is to always encourage your constituents to call our customer service line and register their outage, because that's how we track the area of an outage. It's very helpful when people call. And I know a lot of times people will say, well, my neighbor called. Well, like you alluded to, sometimes it could be a couple people, and that helps us sort of narrow down where an outage is. It also helps us keep track of outages, how frequently, as Dave said, we'll look at how frequently outages occur. All that can be done in our system when people make calls. All that is tracked and it's all inside of our system. And so that's really helpful.
We also have other channels that you can go through as well. Our mobile app is where you can, it's free to download, where you can also report your outage, set up alerts as well. They can also use our website where you can report an outage. You can also look to see how extensive an outage may be or other areas that are impacted. And also, again, set up alerts, get other outage information as well. So those are, those immediate outreaches that your constituents can do. If there's other things that, we can discuss, we definitely can look into there on a larger scale.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from members of the council? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out, and I do appreciate, I understand it. When the power goes out, no one's happy. And so, but when the power goes out 8 times in less than a year in the same neighborhood, and even when they're 20-minute outage, but a couple of them have been lengthy. And yeah. 4 days was one of them. Another one was about a day and a half. I think it was about 36 hours. And then unfortunately, the 4 days was when it was about 90 degrees. And the day and a half was when it was about 25 degrees. And so, not one of those nice fall days, you're like, oh, we'll just throw open the windows and whatever, it was under some pretty extreme circumstances. And, people had, by the 4-day one particularly, everything in the refrigerator and their freezer was thrown away because they just don't last that long. So we do appreciate, I'm not going to ask for a motion tonight to file a complaint, but I'm going to reserve that. If we have another outage next week and the following week, then, I don't think we're going to have any other option as a community than to file with the Public Service Commission. You can tell them all the same stuff and present all the same information you presented to us. But, at that point, I think our residents that have had these outages, we're the ones that they're calling. In addition to calling your customer service and reporting their outages, we're the ones they're calling then to complain because, we answer the phones too, and we know them, they're our neighbors. And so, we won't have any choice but to file a complaint if the outages continue. I appreciate the work that you're doing, but you're just having 2 more within the last 2 weeks. I'm going to say the next time one of them happens, we're going to have to file a complaint with the PSC. So I get that you guys can't control the weather. I understand that. But but controlling but you being able to create a situation in which the weather doesn't impact what you do as much as it does right now is really what our biggest concern is. And I did not realize that that for the 900 customers in that one trunk, it's $12 million. That's a lot borne over only 900 customers. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So normally when we have people speak issue, we ask that you out to the mayor and alderman ahead of a meeting. Is this a question directly for them or is it a question for us? Okay, if you want, as they leave, you can ask your question of them outside of the meeting because we've already moved on. We've already ended the agenda item. Are you okay with talking with them in the hallway? And please stick around to the end of the meeting because I'd like to know what you asked them and what they say as well.
I'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, the next item is a possible public scooter program with Whitefish Bay and Shorewood.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy. The staffs of Whitefish Bay and Shorewood have been informally discussing a possible residential scooter program between the three communities. The city of Milwaukee is also entertaining the option of bringing those back as well. So tonight, staff wanted to get the council's opinion on whether or not to further discussions with the neighboring communities to institute such program. What we would do together is draft an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and possible regulations for the operation of said scooters within the city and the other two communities. As you will see in the packet, there's also the list of frequently asked questions that were included in the packet as well.
I'll open up to members of the council. I mean, I've already told. I use scooters. Every other major city has them, and Milwaukee had them for a while and now they're gone. So I'll open up to the rest of you to offer your input. Alderman Gelhard.
Is it going to cost us anything to have the program?
There is no cost to the city. There's actually the opportunity, depending on the profitability of them, for a payback to the community.
The way their revenue model is structured, they earn a certain amount of money, and then there's formulas built into the contracts, and each of the municipalities that allows scooters gets a regular payment. So we'd actually, by allowing them here as part of our transportation network, then the city actually receives some revenue from it. I mean, I would imagine it's probably not going to be a significant revenue generator for the city of Glendale like it probably was for the city of Milwaukee, but yeah. We're a small area. Anyone else have any? Yeah, Alderwoman Shaw?
I'm just curious because I have not utilized one. How do they track them and how do they recover them when somebody just dumps them?
So they're on an app. You can see where every scooter around you is. They have a tracking device as well. They actually go around and pick them up like in the evening and charge them overnight. So they're fully charged in the morning. They have areas where they put them back out. So they'll be picked up from certain areas, maybe not necessarily dropped off in the same areas. Sometimes they do get sort of abandoned different places, but they're tracked and they go and they pick them up at night and then they take them and recharge them. Because when they had them in Milwaukee, I did one day picking up my daughter from her friend's house, noticed one sitting in the Clovernook neighborhood just along the side of the street. And the next day it was gone. So it was picked up and then taken for charging. So they do track them.
Yeah, because with respect, the only ones I ever hear about are the ones that from the Milwaukee area that got dumped in Lake Michigan. So I just curious.
I don't know how they retrieve those for charging at night, but
I was just curious.
yeah. No, actually, if you have the apps, because I've used them everywhere I travel, including even in Europe and South America. So yeah, when you open up the app, it shows you all the ones that are within, a few blocks of you, and you can keep moving the map to find the nearest one, and then you do everything on your phone to open them. So yeah, they're all tracked. Anyone else with comments? So if the city administrator brings us back a proposal at some point, everyone's kind of like, sure, yeah, we're willing to talk about it more. Okay.
And we have meetings set up with Bay Shore to see if they're interested and level of excitement over this as well.
Okay, wonderful. All right, nothing else then. We'll move on to item 4D, which is renewal of alcohol beverage license applications for the next 12 months. Mr. Cromwell sent me an email earlier with a bunch of questions. I did forward that on to staff. Staff's prepared to answer those questions. Mr. Cromwell asked to speak to this issue. So if you'd like to start with your questions.
Point of order
Yeah.
on the last item.
No,
Best it said.
it says review. And then a review is just discussion essentially. Possible public scooter program with Whitefish Bay and Shorewood. He was just reviewing the concept with us to discuss. Are you looking at the memo? Hold on, Mr. Cromwell.
Yeah, I see, and it says motion to approve.
Oh, it does
authorize
ask for a
staff.
motion to approve or to authorize staff to work with Shorewood and Whitefish Bay on a joint scooter program to develop a written MOU and ordinance. So the agenda doesn't say action, but you put a motion in the memo.
Yeah, my apologies. We don't need a formal action. If you want to just direct me to move forward, that I think would be sufficient for us
Okay.
to move forward. That was my intent.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Alderman, for catching that. I wasn't looking at the memo, I was looking at the agenda, and the agenda doesn't say an action, so thank you for catching that. All right, so Mr. Cromwell.
Sure, Robert Cronwell, 7530 North Applewood Lane. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention that the key code you get along with this license approval is not accurate and hasn't been, because I think I made the same complaint last year. When you're approving these license, the clerk uses a shorthand instead of writing out the full license name when there's multiple licenses. In this case, it's the ALB class of license, which is actually 2 licenses. But when you look at the explanation, it indicates you're getting a Class A intoxicating liquor license and a Class B intoxicating liquor license, and not the beer license that these grocery stores want. So if we could update that so that it shows the correct license being approved.
So I did send this on to the city back with
There we go. There's sort of an internal license type shorthand that's used by the Department of Revenue for reporting purposes. So in other words, the information that they get from municipalities. But the actual applications in this particular case, we looked at them and they were applying for the Class B. Class A, well, to have liquor sales for off-premises consumption. And the reason for that is my understanding of talking to the clerk is that sometimes they have events that go beyond the samples that are
That's my
allowed.
second
So
question. You're on the wrong
Yeah.
question.
You're on the wrong question. I don't think, as long as the list that was provided, whatever it said ALB, and I'll ask the clerk to confirm this, my understanding is that they were applying for a Class A and a Class B, is that right?
The Class A is just a typo because I'm human. So it should just say Class A and Class A. So that's just a typo. And then the DOR also actually changed their liquor license reporting. So going forward, it's actually not going to be ALB, it's going to be AB and AL, because the DOR doesn't like to keep things consistent. Apparently they like to change things, keep it exciting. So that'll change next year. And they literally just changed that. So that will be different
it
next
was
year.
May something,
It was
wasn't it?
like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So so that will change going forward. And then as far as the total wine question, which is going to be the next question you asked, would you like me to just answer that right away?
Sure.
All right. So the total wine thing, they are supposed to be a BLB. And that's because they do wine tastings. They don't just do samplings. So they do wine tastings and they host events. They have a back room where they actually serve alcohol. So when they open, since their inception, they've had a beer, a Class B liquor.
Open.
What's that? I don't want to misquote that, but it was before I started, so at least 2019. Does anybody here remember?
No, they opened during the pandemic. They
Okay.
opened sometime in 2020.
Well, they were
But they've had their-
issued a license
they
in
were issued their
2019, I
license
know
4
that.
years before they opened, and they
Okay.
kept paying to renew their license every year. The reason they came to us for the license 4 years before they ever opened is because they knew they were going to have a Glendale location, and they had problems with Brookfield not issuing them the right kind of liquor license. They wanted to make sure before they invested the money in building the facility here that we would give them the liquor license they needed. So,
They actually had
yes.
a reserve license when they started, and it's been a Class B beer and liquor since they started.
Right.
So
Well, yeah, with the pandemic changes.
Can you speak into the
Class B.
microphone, please?
So yeah, since the pandemic changes, you can have a Class B intoxicating liquor license and sell off premises. That didn't used to be the fact, but you can do it now. I understand that. But my other point was, it's the Class A versions of the licenses that allow free samples.
Right, but they do more than just free samples.
My point is they can't do any free samples under a Class B. In addition, and
That would
one
be a
more
question
point.
for the attorney.
In addition, there's actually a city ordinance that restricts wine samples between 3 and 6 PM, which I think is ridiculous, but it's on the books. So if you want to get that one off the books, that'd be great. Otherwise, they can only do wine between 3 and 6.
What's that ordinance number so I can look it up?
7. $7.2.
Right. Nathan, you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Okay, I just want to, let's work from the general to the specific. So the applicants that are seeking licenses from this body this evening have on file with the municipality applications laying out all their qualifications for either a Class A, a Class B, whatever license that they've applied for. So what you're approving is essentially the application that's on file. The abbreviations that are used internally by the DO. I'm just going to hold these up and show you. The Department of Revenue publishes these license type explanations for municipalities and saying, when you report to us how many of each type you have and how many you've issued, here is a license code description. AB means Class A beer, AC means Class A liquor, AL means Class A liquor. Under the old system that they had right until the end of May into June was they had an ALB, which designates a Class A license and plus a Class B license. All they really did was change their internal designation, and they published an update that said, we're going to stop using the ALB, and from now on, we're going to reference, we're going to use a different code abbreviation for the Class A and a different code abbreviation for the Class B. So that's just really all internal reporting that has to do with when we give data to the DOR. So the licenses that you're being asked to grant are the ones that are on file with the clerk's office and these and relate to the specific requests that were made by each applicant. So you're not going to be approving a Class B when somebody actually asks for a Class A. Everything will be internally reported properly back to the DOR. And I believe if the clerk wants to address this again, in terms of the licenses that were applied for, is there any specific questions or is there anything that you wanted to clarify for the body, the council on that?
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so unless they have a specific
Yeah.
question. I mean, all of the stores, Pick and Save, Trader Joe's, for example, those are all Class A. You take your liquor away, and all of the other ones are restaurants or Class B. So other than Total Wine, which is the unusual exception.
If I understand correctly, Total Wine was the only applicant that was seeking a Class A as
Oh,
well as
they
the
have a-
Class B.
So Total Wine is a BLB, and that was the one that Mr. Cronwell had the question about. That is a BLB, but they are an unusual circumstance from what I understand because they are a liquor store, but they also have wine tasting. So Mr. Cronwell's question is in relation to why we allow them to do sampling, because they should not, his understanding, do sampling. And that is not a question I can address. I'm
Well,
not.
If they have the Class B, which is the intoxicating liquor license, which authorizes retail sale of liquor and wine for consumption on or off, and then the Class B with the B in quotes authorizes retail sale of beer for consumption on or off, which is essentially the combined license, because in some instances, it sounds like they are hosting events or otherwise acting as if they were an on-site retail establishment, quote unquote, I'll use the word bar. So to that effect, they applied differently than some of the other retail establishments did, is my understanding of why they made the application.
All right, so we have before us now all of the liquor license applications to be renewed for the upcoming year. That is, of course, subject to them meeting any qualification or any, do any of them have any outstanding issues with the fire department?
There are still a few that are unabated. Some of them that are on that list that I gave you have fixed their issues. I don't have the current list in front of me, but I know one of the pick and saves has fixed their issues. I believe a couple of the other stores have fixed some of their problems. One of the restaurants that's on there is not even open. Well, actually, two of the restaurants are not even open yet. So that's why they're on the list. So.
All right, so can I get a motion then to approve the 2022 renewal for alcoholic beverage licenses as presented and subject, but if there are any outstanding issues with the fire department, those must be abated before the 2022 renewal is issued.
So moved.
Okay. Moved by
Second.
Alderman Bellhard, second by Alderman Shaw. Any further discussion?
Comment.
Yeah, Alderman Shaw.
Going back to Mr. Cromwell's comments, I kind of vaguely remember when Total Wine was was seeking their approval. I know there was lengthy discussion where they're doing their sampling versus where they're selling. And the sampling, I believe, is in the back room, if you want to call it that, which is not the storefront or retail. So I believe because it's separated and that's all they use it for, that's why they can have both license where you're talking about. They're not allowed to do sampling, and most times it's usually done in the evening after the hours you're talking about. Yeah, that's.
Well, they do sampling in both ways. They could do it in the back room, but they also do it in the store itself.
But
So Rob's question's germane to the issue. I mean, I think we want to be able to allow them to do what they're doing. But I want to make sure we've got the right thing in place.
But I do remember lengthy discussion because of the situation, and the attorney at the time commented on it as well.
If you recall, when they opened in Brookfield, Brookfield refused to give them the one that allowed them to do the sampling, and that's part of what Total Wine does. So they actually engaged in the political process and ran ads and, gave money to candidates. They were very upset with the way Brookfield handled the situation. Fixed the situation. Eventually fix the situation. He came to Glendale almost immediately when Bayshore was still under its previous owners and said, will you grant us a liquor license? And here are all the conditions we need to meet. And we granted them the liquor license that they would need, the appropriate liquor license. And they've been renewing the same one ever since. So, yeah. All right. So we have a motion and properly seconded. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is review of the Glendale New Resident Guide.
So staff have been researching ideas and opportunities to provide a comprehensive packet to new residents who are moving to the city of Glendale.
Like the city administrator?
I like the city administrator. Yeah. I was actually, this was sort of, I was looking around to try to find out what my gas company would be, what my electric company could be, where do I call for water service, garbage service, and I could not locate a document that included all the information on the city's website. So I developed this document sort of selfishly to try to provide a comprehensive list to anybody who's moving into the city. We worked with the North Shore Chamber of Commerce, Welcome to Glendale, and staff to develop this very comprehensive guide. And of course, the mayor as well was a big contributor as well. So just wanted to get the council's feedback on this document.
Great. Step to always find something you can improve on it, but I think we think we'd have that already. So I'm glad we have it now.
Alderman Vukovic?
Moved here, a pack. I don't know why I got it, but I got a packet with all this stuff in it, including like some coupons of different restaurants that were around and all this information in one like envelope that I got when we moved in. So I thought that the city always did this. And I think I've been here 10 years now, 9 or 10 years, but I got it right when I moved in.
So I got something when I moved in, but it was from my realtor, and I know leasing companies also will give things to people when they move in, but in terms of the city providing something, I don't know that we ever have.
Oh,
So,
I thought the city did, so.
okay, Alderwoman Shaw.
I will say, I think I've been in the city the longest out of all of y'all. And even though I did not get anything, but it is what was called the old welcome wagon. My husband's first mother-in-law was part of that, so.
Welcome away. All right. So any other feedback for the city administrator? Anything missing? Any feedback when people want to give?
And we could, of course, update it anytime. So if you have any suggestions and you look through it later date, please let me know. We'll update it. We'll put it on the website once we're ready to go.
Yeah, this doesn't need like a policy or anything. So it's not a policy, so it doesn't need any sort of emotion for us. It's just something that's gonna be added to the website and shared.
That is correct. We'd probably put it on Facebook, a link on there as well too, so people
Okay.
can see it.
All right. And our final item of new business is an authorization to proceed with the appraisal of 6130 North Sunny Point Road with all costs reimbursed by MMSD. Turn it over to staff.
I believe John Phillips is here to handle this one.
Okay.
John, do you mind?
Is this one of those floodplain properties?
One of those floodplain properties. So actually, the city was approached. So as you know, we have this program with the MMSD and we have a selected number of properties, particularly at the point on the farther end of Sunny Point, that we actually send out a letter each year and let them know that this program exists and that we're interested. In this particular instance, this is a property that's just kind of behind the elementary school, this side of the river. And they have had a death in the family. It is now owned by 3 siblings, and they are not interested in living in the property anymore. They were aware of the program and would like to participate rather than putting the house on the market and selling it back into circulation, I guess, essentially. So that's essentially the situation in this case. And we have talked. We've talked to the MSD. They seem to, they understand the process, and so they would like to move forward over the next few months for the acquisition of this particular property.
All we need tonight is a motion. Appraisal, because I believe the way it works is we do the appraisal, so we're paying for that and then we get reimbursed.
Correct. And if they don't like the appraisal, there can be a second appraisal. But from my understanding is most everyone has the appraisals have come out. Everyone's agreed to them so far, but.
Do the initial.
We're currently working on one right now in a different section of Sunny Point as well. So this would be the second one we'd currently be working on.
Proceed with. Alderwoman Shaw, is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Vukovic. Any further discussion? Alderman Gelhardt?
Clarification here. So we've got 6130 North Sunny Point Road on the agenda. Then we've got 6310 at 2 points in the materials, and then 6130 2 times in the materials also. So I guess just a clarification, what is the address?
It is 6130 because there's a map, the certified survey map indicates what property. There is you're correct. On the agenda, it's
Typo.
correct, 6130. In the memo, the motion says 6130, but in some of the narrative in the memo, it's 6310. There must have just been a transposing of the numbers there. It is 6130. Yep, that's what the map shows. The agenda is correct, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And lastly, commission, committee, and board and staff reports. I don't have anything to report tonight. I'll turn it over to the city clerk. Anything to report?
Absentee ballots went out last Thursday, so people who had a request on file should have gotten their ballots already or get them this week.
Nothing to report tonight.
Okay, city administrator,
Nothing tonight.
Ernie?
Nothing this evening.
All right, so go around the council. Number 1. Number 2.
Report tonight.
Number 3.
Nothing this evening.
Number 6.
We have a tentatively scheduled Music in the Glen meeting for July 6th at Welcome to Glendale Place. And then the following week after that, we start with our first concert. And that is also our salute to veterans. So if you'd like to join us, that would be awesome. And right now I'm drawing a blank on who our first Command Performance, which is big band. And they've done it once before, so they know the drill. So hopefully everyone joins us for our salute to veterans.
All right. Well, thank you all. We've handled all of our agenda. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Gelhardt, second by Alderwoman Shaw. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. I thought tonight would take 2 hours. I was not wrong.
Within 5 minutes.